All right, this needs to be unpacked carefully. Cleveland Browns running back Quinshon Judkins has stepped forward and addressed what he believes is an ongoing pattern of sabotage within the organization. And this situation has now grown far beyond one player. It's no longer just about number 12. It's no longer only about Shedeur Sanders. Judkins himself was on pace for a 1,000-yard rushing season before everything started to unravel. Starting games behind the sticks consistently puts an offense in a compromised position. It limits field leverage, disrupts timing, and makes it far harder to capitalize on scoring opportunities. As Judkins explained, when you can't anticipate what's coming or establish rhythm early, it puts players at an immediate disadvantage. Foreshadowing, preparation, and situational awareness matter. And when those elements disappear, performance suffers across the board. Now imagine a head coach not merely failing to elevate his players, but repeatedly placing them in scenarios where failure feels almost inevitable. For many observers closely tracking the Cleveland Browns, that uncomfortable possibility has begun to feel disturbingly real. This isn't some fringe theory pulled out of thin air. What has unfolded under Kevin Stefanski has sparked serious questions about leadership, trust, and long-term intent. This goes well beyond questionable play design or a handful of bad game calls. The concerns point toward decisions that players believe actively erode confidence, stall production, and put careers in jeopardy. At the center of it all is Quinshon Judkins, a young player with legitimate upside who chose to speak out following his season-ending injury against the Buffalo Bills. He was on track for a 1,000-yard campaign, but instead now faces surgery and a long recovery. The injury itself was brutal. Judkins leaked out into the flat on a lateral pass from Shedeur Sanders. He caught the ball in open space but found himself isolated one-on-one with a defender. The contact appeared to hit his left side, but his right leg tried to brace and plant awkwardly. Something immediately went wrong. The damage was so severe that broadcasters chose not to show a replay. According to Judkins, Stefanski repeatedly placed him in uncomfortable and unnatural roles, including lining him up at quarterback for select offensive packages. Judkins did not view those moments as innovative or forward-thinking. From his perspective, they felt deliberate and poorly timed, putting him in situations where success was highly unlikely. He believes those decisions had nothing to do with development and everything to do with something else entirely. Judkins also believes those choices directly disrupted Shedeur Sanders' rhythm, damaging his numbers, interrupting his flow, and slowing his on-field growth. In his view, these were not harmless football experiments or innocent miscalculations. They were calculated decisions with real and lasting consequences. The tension escalated further when Wyatt Teller, a respected veteran voice in the locker room, revealed that he had been listed as injured under highly questionable circumstances. Teller has stated clearly that he was healthy, prepared, and ready to play. Yet the injury used to justify sidelining him, according to Teller, never actually existed. That revelation alone raised serious concerns about honesty, transparency, and internal communication within the coaching staff. Even after being cleared, Teller remained on the bench. When veterans openly challenge injury designations, the issue goes far beyond routine roster management. Then there's the baffling handling of Jerry Jeudy. Despite ongoing struggles and limited production, Jeudy continued to receive consistent snaps week after week. Meanwhile, responsibility for offensive breakdowns kept being redirected toward Shedeur Sanders, even when film clearly showed issues extending far beyond the quarterback position. At this point, it no longer feels like simple misjudgment. It starts to look chaotic, unstable, and poorly coordinated. Situations like this can fracture an entire locker room. When accountability feels selective, frustration builds quickly. When trust in leadership erodes, performance almost always follows. And that puts Kevin Stefanski in an increasingly precarious position, especially now that these concerns are no longer confined to private conversations. Stop everything. Seriously, stop everything right now. If you're part of the dog pound, if this team has already stolen your sleep, if you've ever screamed at your TV because of the Browns, understand this. This is not just another news cycle. Today, Cleveland is divided. Today, the future of this franchise is being debated behind closed doors. And today, one of the most respected leaders in that locker room chose to speak. And when Joel Bitonio talks, it isn't noise, it's a signal, because what he just did carries real weight. He publicly backed Kevin Stefanski in the middle of legitimate firing rumors. That's not a footnote, that's a warning flare. Cleveland is either standing on the edge of yet another massive reset or preparing to repeat the same destructive mistake all over again. So let's deal in facts. No sugarcoating, no excuses. Kevin Stefanski is under pressure like never before, and the reason is brutally simple. 3-12. 3 wins, 12 losses, 2 games left. That record hurts. That cuts straight into the soul of the dog pound. But here's the part that cannot be ignored. This same man has won NFL Coach of the Year twice. Not once, twice. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when the entire league recognizes you squeezed far more out of a roster than it reasonably should have delivered. And yet, all the noise around the Browns says the same thing. Stefanski could be gone. Then, in the middle of this chaos, Joel Bitonio steps forward. A veteran, a quiet cornerstone, a leader who doesn't speak just to hear his own voice. And he says the locker room hasn't been lost. That sentence carries enormous weight. Now let me speak as a fan, no filter. When teams lose, the first head people call for is always the coach. Every time. But let's be honest with each other for a second. The Browns' biggest problem over the past few years has lived at one position, and everyone knows exactly which one. Quarterback. Since 2022, it's been a full-blown soap opera, a massive gamble, a fully guaranteed $230 million contract. The logic was simple. Fix the quarterback and compete for a Super Bowl. The reality? Injuries, missed time, zero continuity. And when he did play, the performance never came close to what was promised. Bitonio said something that is absolute truth in today's NFL. You cannot win without stability at quarterback. In 2023, the Browns started 5, maybe 6 different quarterbacks. That's not a strategy, that's survival mode. And still, Stefanski dragged this team into the playoffs. Still, the defense became elite. Still, this team competed. Now look at 2024 and 2025. Same carousel, same temporary fixes, same young quarterbacks thrown directly into the fire. And the question echoing through the locker room is painfully simple. How far can you really go like this? Behind the scenes, the message is clear. Jimmy Haslam hasn't made a decision yet. According to Tom Pelissero of NFL Network, the Browns owner is wrestling with one core question. Is Kevin Stefanski the right man to lead a rebuild centered around young quarterbacks? If the answer is no, he may move on. But here's the part that should terrify Cleveland. If Stefanski is fired, he will not be unemployed. The Giants, the Titans, other teams are already lining up to make that call. That should set off flashing red alarms in Berea. Here's something that never shows up in box scores. When a leader like Joel Bitonio speaks publicly, that message isn't just for fans, it's for the front office, it's for the locker room. He's saying this isn't just on the coach. This team still plays for Stefanski, this team still believes. And once you break that, once you start cycling coaches endlessly, you become exactly what the Browns were for decades. Unstable, impatient, perpetually starting over. The dog pound is exhausted by that, exhausted by resets, exhausted by empty promises. Cleveland is burning with passion, but drowning in doubt. So let me challenge you, because this is the moment. If you fire Stefanski, who are you hiring? And more importantly, with which quarterback are you starting the cycle all over again? New coach, new system, same unresolved problem at the most important position in sports? Or do you finally admit the mistake wasn't emotional, it was structural? Is the front office listening to the locker room or reacting to outside noise? Because emotional decisions are the fastest path to organizational collapse. I say this with a heavy but honest heart. Kevin Stefanski is not a savior, but he is not the villain either. And if Joel Bitonio, one of the foundational pillars of this franchise, is saying the coach deserves to stay, maybe it's time Cleveland listens to the voices inside the building. Now I want to hear you. Does Stefanski stay or go? Is the real problem the coach or the quarterback? Drop a comment. Debate it. Let's talk like real fans. And if you're living this NFL season feeling every hit right alongside the Browns, subscribe to Browns News today. No characters, no gimmicks, just passion. Here we go, Brownies. Because being a Browns fan means suffering, but never ever stopping believing. What truly unsettles fans is the repeating pattern. Week after week, the Browns' offense lacks a clear identity. Plays that suddenly show promise vanish without explanation. Players who begin to find rhythm are abruptly removed from their roles. Sideline communication rarely aligns with what actually unfolds on the field. For young players fighting to establish respect and stability in the league, that level of unpredictability can severely stunt development. Confidence is everything in the NFL, and reps are just as critical. When players are forced to guess their role from one week to the next, growth stalls. Instead of playing freely, they become cautious, and that hesitation shows. Multiple observers have noted that the Browns' offense often appears disconnected, almost as if the players aren't fully aligned with the game plan. That kind of disconnect doesn't appear overnight. It develops when communication breaks down and trust begins to fade between players and coaches. The Judkins situation only amplified those warning signs. Using a player at quarterback in limited packages can work in rare, carefully planned moments. But when that usage feels misaligned with a player's strengths and timing, it raises serious red flags. Judkins believes those snaps disrupted his comfort and threw off the entire offensive flow. And once players start questioning the reasoning behind decisions, the locker room atmosphere shifts. Conversations change. Buy-in erodes. That is often the moment when leadership begins to lose its grip. Wyatt Teller's comments only added gravity to an already troubling situation. Injury designations in the NFL are not trivial footnotes. They influence contracts, shape public perception, and can alter the entire trajectory of a player's career. When a respected veteran openly challenges the legitimacy of an injury label, it forces everyone to question whether roster decisions were truly rooted in football logic. That concern intensifies when accountability appears uneven. Jerry Jeudy continued to receive opportunities despite ongoing struggles, while Shedeur Sanders absorbed disproportionate scrutiny for offensive breakdowns. Fans noticed it. Analysts picked up on it. And inside the locker room, players notice everything. When blame feels misdirected, resentment doesn't explode loudly. It settles quietly. And once resentment takes hold, performance usually declines right along with it. This situation has grown beyond one coach or one season. It now raises a far more serious question. Are the Browns fostering an environment designed to help players thrive, or one that subtly holds them back? NFL players understand that adaptability is part of the profession. Schemes evolve, roles shift. What Judkins describes, however, goes well beyond normal adjustment. From his perspective, it crossed into reckless territory. Judkins says the quarterback role he was assigned felt completely foreign. No background, no meaningful reps, no real preparation. Instead of being positioned to succeed, he felt dropped into scenarios where failure was almost inevitable. He makes it clear this wasn't about learning on the fly. There was no structure, no support, and no coherent plan. Even more troubling is his belief that these decisions carried intent. Judkins claims Kevin Stefanski's choices went beyond experimentation, actively disrupting Shedeur Sanders' rhythm and creating moments that damaged him statistically. That accusation alone strikes at the heart of leadership. Was Stefanski attempting to deflect attention from broader coaching shortcomings? Or was this about maintaining control of the offensive hierarchy by undercutting a player perceived as a long-term challenge to the status quo? Either explanation paints an unsettling picture. Judkins' remarks suggest this wasn't an isolated misstep, but a recurring pattern of decisions that felt manipulative rather than developmental. When players begin to feel used instead of supported, the consequences ripple far beyond one position group. Zooming out to the locker room makes the issue even clearer. Trust is the foundation of every successful team. Players must believe their coaches are putting them in the best possible position to win. When that belief fractures, everything else starts to unravel. Watching teammates get thrust into roles they are clearly unprepared for breeds doubt, especially when those decisions don't seem connected to winning, but to something else entirely. If Judkins' claims hold weight, the issue extends far beyond individual players. It points to leadership decisions that slowly erode the foundation of the roster. Once players begin questioning whether moves are driven by football or internal politics, commitment drops rapidly. When trust fades, unity is usually the next casualty. NFL locker rooms run on accountability and belief. Players sacrifice their bodies every week because they trust the plan laid out for them. When that trust weakens, effort becomes transactional. Judkins' experience sends a clear message throughout the room. If one player can be placed in a no-win situation without regard for readiness, no role is truly secure. That kind of uncertainty breeds anxiety, not confidence. Veterans start protecting themselves. Younger players tighten up, fearful of becoming the next example used to shift blame or control the narrative. When situations like this surface, the damage rarely stays contained. Divisions can form quickly. Players who believe Shedeur Sanders or Quinshon Judkins were treated unfairly may begin distancing themselves from Stefanski, while others who feel insulated by the staff remain aligned. That kind of split is dangerous for any organization. Once trust divides a locker room, talent alone cannot hold it together. Chemistry erodes, communication breaks down. Even the most talented roster on paper can collapse when everyone stops pulling in the same direction. And just when it seemed the situation couldn't grow heavier, another revelation surfaced, this time from Wyatt Teller, one of the Browns' most respected and influential veterans. Teller stepped forward with a claim that raised eyebrows across the league. He stated he was sidelined due to an injury that, according to him, never actually existed. Teller maintained he was in peak condition and fully ready to play, yet remained on the sideline while the team publicly cited injury as the reason. That claim does more than challenge a single lineup decision. It directly calls Kevin Stefanski's credibility as a leader into question. Keeping a player of Teller's caliber off the field when he insists he was healthy raises uncomfortable questions. What was the real motive behind that choice? Those are the questions players and fans are now asking openly. This no longer looks like a simple misunderstanding. It suggests a pattern in which information may have been shaped to control narratives or divert attention away from deeper organizational issues. For a player like Teller, someone who values preparation, accountability, and honesty, being publicly sidelined under questionable circumstances cuts deep. And when veterans reach a point where they feel compelled to speak out, it's usually a sign that something inside the building has already begun to fracture. Being misrepresented cuts deep, and it sends a chilling message throughout an entire locker room. It's one thing for players to disagree with a game plan or question a schematic choice. It's something entirely different to feel misled about health and availability. Once honesty around injuries comes into question, everything else starts to unravel. If a coach is willing to bend the truth on something that's serious, players naturally begin wondering what else might be happening behind closed doors. That kind of doubt isolates leadership quickly and decisively. The fallout from situations like this extends far beyond a single conversation in the locker room. Injuries in the NFL aren't just physical setbacks. They affect contracts, reputations, and long-term career trajectories. Being labeled as injured when a player believes he's healthy can quietly erode leverage and alter perception across the league. That's exactly why Wyatt Teller's claim struck such a nerve. Veterans understand how the business truly works. They know how front offices, agents, and rival teams monitor availability. When that information feels distorted, trust doesn't merely weaken, it fractures. And once veterans feel that fracture, younger players feel it even more intensely. Rookies and developing players watch how established veterans are treated. They take mental notes. If someone as respected and accomplished as Teller can be sidelined under questionable circumstances, others start wondering what protection they really have. That fear changes behavior. Players become guarded. They hesitate to speak openly. They second-guess instructions instead of playing instinctively. Instead of playing loose and confident, they play cautious, and cautious football loses games. Now, layer in the Jerry Jeudy situation, and the picture grows even messier. Despite repeated struggles on the field, Jeudy continued to receive opportunities. Drops, timing issues, and inconsistency were obvious to anyone watching. Yet accountability still appeared uneven. Rather than fully owning systemic flaws or coaching misfires, criticism kept circling back to Shedeur Sanders. To many observers, that felt like misplaced blame. This wasn't just about one receiver underperforming, it was about responsibility. When coaches avoid accountability for offensive breakdowns, players notice immediately. When one player is repeatedly shielded while another absorbs constant pressure, resentment begins to build. That resentment spreads quietly. Instead of a unified locker room moving in one direction, divisions start forming, conversations shift, body language changes, effort becomes conditional. Winning teams survive adversity because players believe leadership is honest, fair, and aligned with their success. When that belief disappears, even the most talented teams begin collapsing from the inside. This situation feels especially fragile because once players stop trusting explanations and start questioning motives, the damage becomes cultural. And in the NFL, a broken culture is one of the hardest things to repair. Once players start asking themselves if they might be next, the locker room stops feeling like a brotherhood and starts feeling like survival mode. Players begin prioritizing reputation, contract value, and long-term career security. That mindset does not produce winning football. The Shedeur Sanders situation only intensifies those fears. Quarterbacks naturally become lightning rods for blame. When deeper structural issues go unaddressed, everyone notices. Receivers notice, linemen notice, veterans notice. Players understand how the game really works. If they believe one teammate is being set up to fail, they start questioning whether fairness exists at all. That's how factions form. Some players align closely with leadership, hoping to remain protected. Others rally around teammates they believe are being treated unfairly. Suddenly, the locker room has sides. Whispers grow louder. Tension spills onto the field. At that point, it's no longer about personalities. It's about culture. Teams don't collapse because of one bad play. They collapse when trust erodes and communication breaks down. When players stop believing explanations and start reading between the lines, performance slips. The core issue here isn't play design, it's intent. Players can live with mistakes. They struggle to live with manipulation. If Quinshon Judkins truly felt his role was used for something other than team success, that belief alone is enough to fracture morale. And once morale cracks, repairing it during a season becomes nearly impossible. That's why these allegations carry so much weight. When Sanders struggled with his development and results, criticism arrived swiftly. At the same time, Jeudy continued to see the field despite visible issues. Players saw it. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Sanders often absorbed blame regardless of broader context. That double standard sent a clear message. Some players were given grace, while others were used as pressure valves. For Sanders, that treatment can damage confidence and stunt growth. For the locker room, it corrodes chemistry even faster. This is yet another example of how leadership decisions can quietly tear a team apart from the inside. Kevin Stefanski now faces serious and unavoidable questions. The combined claims from Quinshon Judkins, Wyatt Teller, and the ongoing issues involving Jeudy and Sanders paint a deeply troubling picture. It suggests a coach more focused on managing narratives and protecting himself than cultivating trust across the roster. Whether it's placing players in uncomfortable roles, issuing questionable injury designations, or redirecting blame, the result has been a toxic environment inside the Cleveland Browns locker room. The real question now is whether Stefanski can repair the damage, or whether the line has already been crossed. If this path continues, players may begin checking out mentally, believing leadership cares more about image than cohesion. That's when seasons quietly slip away. The Browns are now facing a serious internal crisis, and how it's handled will determine whether this team stabilizes or continues to fracture from within. This is where the story stops being about play calls, rotations, or a rough stretch of games. It becomes about credibility. And once trust is gone, no scheme, no matter how clever, can save you.